Hello and welcome to Vibrant Living Diaries, the podcast where we unlock the secrets of how you can renew your inner vitality and relearn what it means to live a life with energy and purpose. I'm your host, Danielle Grobman, and I'm proudly collaborating with the International Wellness Alliance. This alliance is home to experts across the world whose specialties allow us to cover the entire spectrum of health and wellness. Just as a disclaimer, the stances our guests take on this podcast and the topics we cover are not representative of our individual perspectives. We are here to gain a holistic understanding of all points of view. All information and advice we give here are purely for entertainment purposes. If you're planning on making any lifestyle and/or health changes based on what we cover here, please consult with your main medical wellness practitioner to find the best next steps for you to take on your wellness journey. Today we welcome Johann Callaghan, the founder of Sleep Success Method and a sleep success coach. Johann is dedicated to teaching busy women professionals how to optimize their energy, focus, and clarity through better sleep practices. As an acclaimed author, speaker, and podcaster, Johann brings a wealth of knowledge on the vital role sleep plays on our overall well-being and is the center of today's episode. The most fascinating ones we'll be diving into in today's episode will be related to heart disease, high cholesterol, diabetes, and sleep's implication on the three. We're very eager to have her with us today, so without further ado. Well, Johann, thank you for being here today.
I'm delighted, Danny. I'm so excited. I love talking about sleep, so really excited to dive into this conversation with you.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to get into it as well. I remember the last we spoke, we were already starting to touch on these concepts, and we were like, we have to save some of this for later. To kind of dive right in, can you first and foremost, before we touch on too many things, tell us a little bit about how you got into this line of work, why you even chose to specialize in sleep to begin with?
Yeah, very important questions. It was kind of a long journey. Like, I myself did have a lot of trouble with sleep from when I was a young child. My father drank quite an awful lot, so there's many sleepless nights as a child, going into school very tired. And then fast forward, and when I got a bit older and I started working, and again, my dad was still drinking, and there was a lot of trouble with that. And I'd go into work absolutely exhausted. I remember one time in work, literally hiding in the ladies' bathroom and just putting the lid down on the toilet and just sitting there and put my head against the wall just to have a power nap. I was so tired, like it was frighteningly tired. And it was like that nearly every day. And I was driving as well. And it's very dangerous to drive when you're tired. It's like drinking and driving. And then as I progressed, I got married. My husband ended up having sleep apnea. I'd loads of stories. But how I actually started getting into this work, my daughter died. My daughter died at birth in 2007. And it was at that point when I just couldn't take life anymore. I was like, start questioning, what is life all about anyway? And I went on this spiritual quest, this spiritual journey, if you like. And I met a lady, and she taught me all about self-care, like really looking after us. And as mothers, as women and mothers, we're the last person to look after ourselves. We put everybody else first. And I got to see how important that was, to put myself first, put my own oxygen mask on first before I can look after anybody else. Fill your cup up first. And I started diving into holistic therapies, massage, Reiki, reflexology. I trained in all those areas. So I'm holistic therapist as well. And then I met a mentor, and he said, Joanne, you got to write a book to really raise your credibility. And I didn't know what to write a book on. And he said, well, what pain are your clients in? What are they complaining about? What problems are they having? And I said, well, most of them are tired. They're coming to me for massage and they're tired. They've no energy. So I wrote the book on sleep. It's called How to Get a Good Night's Sleep. And from there, Danny, everything just escalated, because once you write a book, there seems to be an authoritative kind of a view of you. Like, obviously, if you've written a book, you know your subject, you've done the research. And I start getting radio interviews and podcast interviews and speaking opportunities. And then I learned how to, speak, do my own podcasts. And it just escalated and got bigger and bigger. And the more I'm speaking about this topic, I'm still learning new stuff every day about sleep. Like, sleep research and science is a relatively new thing. We've only learned an awful lot in the last 15, 20 years, maybe, really a deep dive into sleep, what it is all about. And it's just fascinating what I'm finding and what other researchers are finding, and it's just definitely something that we need to prioritize in our life, because we cannot survive without sleep. Everything else is important, all the pillars, but sleep really is ultimately the golden nugget. It really is the first and foremost, in my opinion. So that's what got me into sleep. I think it's just truly fascinating, all the benefits that it can provide. Yeah, I just love it. And I speak to all sorts of people, because it affects everybody. So yeah, that's my story.
We didn't talk about that the last we spoke. My condolences to your daughter. I didn't know that that was what got you into this line of work.
Mm.
With heartbreak of that magnitude, you could have taken a lot of different directions when it comes to the work you do and when it comes to your life. Sleep, I do think it is very, very important, but you also said that you started with self-care and things like this.
Yeah.
Did you find that you were neglecting sleep more than you were any other kinds of form of self-care? Because when people go through really traumatic experiences, they often say that they sleep a lot. Like they sleep more than what they used to sleep before, because they just don't want to have to deal with life. Were you
Yeah.
finding that for you it was something different and then that led you down the rabbit hole? Or did you find that I'm getting way too much sleep and I need to find a good balance?
Yeah, well, I experienced quite a few different perspectives of it, because after I lost my daughter Megan and I was giving up on life, I was suicidal, let's say. I was having those thoughts, and it was very scary because I was abused when I was very young. I was a single parent at a very young age, so more sleepless nights as a teenage mum. So I was just at the end of it. I couldn't take any more, and I went into a deep spiral of depression. And I made myself sleep because I couldn't deal with the pain of being awake. Because when I'm awake, I was experiencing the pain of grief, anger, and all these parts of grief, and I just couldn't deal with it. So I would make myself sleep, and I slept very, very long hours. And sleeping too much is just as bad as sleeping too little. So that's a sign of depression when you're sleeping too much. A lot of people just make themselves sleep, if they can, with maybe sometimes with alcohol or whatever. Like, I didn't drink at the time. Thank God, I never really drank. But you can actually sleep too much to escape. It's a form of escapism from reality. So we need to have that balance, that sweet spot, the Goldilocks. And everybody is different. And this is the whole point, that everyone is an individual. So we have to take responsibility for our care. And self-care is very different for everybody. And, especially for women, because I didn't realize the importance of sleep, and I didn't have it as one of my values. And what we don't value, we don't prioritize. And I started to, look after myself in terms of, what I was eating and moving and exercise and all that kind of thing, without going to extremes. But I never really thought of sleep as a pillar of health, because it's not often talked about. At least, well, in the last couple of years, it's really starting to be talked about now, but it wasn't back then. It's really true. My own experience, just the want of sleep. When I was really tired, I couldn't think properly. I was getting more colds and flus. I was more prone to infections and viral infections and all this kind of thing, which is very much correlated to lack of sleep. Yeah, that was my experience. So having self-care and being aware of looking after yourself first, and knowing what type of self-care works for you as an individual. But all these pillars matter, what you eat, how you move, how you sleep. But all these pillars are all different for everybody. So that's why we each as individuals have to take responsibility and know what it is that we like and enjoy doing and what works for us.
There's so many different directions that you can take with this, and there's so many questions that I want to ask regarding sleep and regarding your susceptibility to disease and infection and things like this, because I, for one, know that when I sleep too much, I feel like I need more sleep, if that even makes sense. And when I don't sleep enough, sometimes I feel like I don't even need sleep at all. Like it ranges on such weird extremes that finding balance and finding that moderation it's so key. And in terms of what you can see happen to your body when you're not getting enough sleep, how that manifests, how is it different from when you get too much sleep and how that manifests?
Yeah, great question. Because when you get too much sleep, so our body, if we go back to the caves, right, when we lived in caves, I always like going back to this, because our world around us is very different now than what it was 150 years ago, never mind when we were living in caves, right? But we were so aligned to our circadian rhythm. So the circadian rhythm is this 24-hour biological process, and we have all these different behaviors, like how our body functions, and we have fluctuations throughout this 24-hour period. And it happens, it's a routine that the body is aligned with. It's aligned with this circadian rhythm, this movement of light and darkness, this awakefulness and sleep time when we're sleeping at nighttime. And when we were, when we were living more outdoors, and we had access to the natural daylight, which is a cue for our circadian rhythm. And nowadays we're spending most of our time indoors and we're not moving. It's like sitting is the new disease. It's nearly equivalent to smoking, where we're sitting so long and we're indoors. So we're not moving. When we're not moving, that's a sign to the body that when we exercise, it's a cue to the body that we're awake, we're moving, we're awake. And there's a lot more that's happening in the body when we're exercising exercise and our movement. Some people don't like the word exercise, that's why I'm saying movement, but it's a cue for the body. The body knows it's awake and it needs to be alert when we're moving. So all these things are important as part of the circadian rhythm and as part of our cycles and metabolisms during the daytime as well. When we have natural lows during the daytime and our hormones, they change throughout the daytime. So when we sleep too much, the body gets confused, because if we're sleeping, we're going to be indoors. Obviously, we're not getting daylight, and getting daylight when the sun rises or as close to when the sun rises is super, super important. So if we're sleeping on late in the morning time, we're missing that morning cue, and it makes the body confused, and your whole circadian rhythm is shifting. And when your body is shifting, it's always trying to get back into an alignment, and that's a stress in and of itself. That's a stress. And we're not getting the serotonin, which is our feel-good hormone. So we get serotonin from natural daylight as well. We need serotonin to make melatonin, which is our sleep hormones, and then it's going to give us problems when we're sleeping at nighttime or trying to stay asleep during the night. Some people find it difficult to get asleep. Some people find it that they wake up in the middle of the night, and this could all to do with the hormones as well. There's other reasons why we may wake up during the nighttime. But yeah, sleeping too much is not aligned with the circadian rhythm, and sleeping too little is not sufficient enough for all the recovery, the heal and repair, and all the brain clearing out that happens at nighttime, which has really only been discovered in the last 15 years or so, this clearing out of toxins in the brain. So sleeping too much, sleeping too little, they're just as bad as each other.
How does susceptibility to disease play a role in this as well? Because if sleeping too much is bad for you because it's throwing off your circadian rhythm, sleeping too little, we already know that it's going to increase your susceptibility to disease. Does that also come with too much?
Yeah, so any form of stress in the body is, and especially when we're not sleeping enough. If we're not sleeping enough, the immune system is very, very much affected. Studies have shown that sleep for 5 hours or less a night, we can lose up to 50% of our effectiveness of our immune system. Our white killer cells, which is part of the immune system, they're made in our deep phase of sleep. And when we're not sleeping enough, we're losing out on this. Even people who, go for their flu shots, some people go for their flu shots in the winter time. I personally don't. But if you're one of those people, if you get a flu shot and you haven't slept well the night before, well, then the effectiveness of that flu shot is reduced by 50%. And studies have actually shown this. So if you haven't slept well the night before, don't go for a flu shot. You're just wasting your time. And the same with when you're recovering. If you have a cold or a common cold or viral infection or whatever, you will notice that you actually get very tired, because the immune system, the body is fighting. The immune system is trying to fight this viral infection, and it needs sleep. It needs that mode, if you like, that kind of body, that's that switch. And your body actually is very clever. It makes you sleep so that you can fight this immune system, so we can switch that mode on for healing and recovery. That's why we get very tired. You hear the doctor will say get plenty of rest and drink plenty of water if you have a really bad cold, and that's the best way that we can recover. Inflammation is a huge marker for disease, and when the body is stressed and when we haven't slept well, the cytokines, which is a protein, it becomes out of balance, and there's too much inflammation in the body. And when there's too much inflammation in the body, it can't cope. Now, we do need inflammation, but again, when there's too much of it, that's when we start to have problems and the body can't cope. This can lead to high blood pressure and putting on weight and heart disease problems, and this is over a long period of time now, but routinely we get into bad habits, and routinely, there are people who don't sleep well or don't appreciate sleep and don't prioritize it, and this is how they live, and they don't know any different. Yeah, 10 years can go by very quickly.
Yeah, can you touch a little bit more on obesity and the negative effects of weight gain and not getting enough sleep?
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people are not aware of. It's got to do with the hormones and our eating habits and all of this. So when we don't sleep, when we don't get enough sufficient sleep, there's two main hormones, ghrelin and leptin, that are impacted, and they go out of balance. Leptin makes us feel full, discontent and satisfied, and ghrelin is the hunger hormone, ghrelin. And when we are sleep deprived, this hormone is heightened, and when this hormone is heightened, and see, the body is very, very clever. If we haven't slept well, obviously our energy is very low. So what does the body do to make us get more energy? Well, very intelligently, it makes us eat foods that have a quick access to glucose being our energy source. So what foods contain glucose or convert quickly to glucose? Well, they're all our white foods like bread and pasta or cakes and biscuits. So we actually have a craving. So when we're tired, not only are we hungry, but we have cravings. We get cravings for the wrong types of food. So this is adding to our blood glucose level. And when we have too much glucose in our body, this can be stored as fat. And then we get obesity. And obesity, a lot of people with sleep apnea have obesity as well. And it's the majority of people with sleep apnea are obese. So that's the main reason why. And then at nighttime when we're sleeping, we have what's called the growth hormone. And the growth hormone is activated. It's released when we're in a deep phase of sleep. And what's significant about the growth hormone is this does all the healing and repairing in our body, but it's also a fat burning hormone. It's helping to utilize that energy source using the fat supplies. So when we don't sleep well at nighttime, we're not using that resource as much. So there's a few, we're not going into too much depth, but there is a lot of correlation with obesity, overweight, and 6 out of 10 people in Ireland are either overweight or obese, and that's significant. That's huge. Obesity has been correlated with heart disease and high blood pressure and sleep apnea and all these other diseases as well. Yeah, losing weight is probably the best thing that we can do. And when you get a good night of sleep, it can really help. Now, obviously, there's other things as well. We need to move, we need to, mind our diet and all that. But when we get a good night of sleep, it does actually help us to be more effective at losing weight.
And can you also touch on how type 2 diabetes plays a role in this as well? Because that is also an emerging issue that a lot of people are starting to wake up to, and how insulin resistance plays a role into all of this as well, and how sleep can either help mitigate or act as like a preventative measure against type 2 diabetes kind of expressing itself.
Yeah, it's a topic for sure, type 2 diabetes, and a lot of people aren't even aware that they may have type 2 diabetes, much like sleep apnea. A lot of people are not aware that they have sleep apnea. But with the type 2 diabetes, it's very dangerous because of the other effects, the neuropathy and the nerve damage and eye damage, kidney damage, and people having to get their feet amputated and all these terrible things. And that's over a long period of time, but it leads to that as well, the type 2 diabetes. But effectively, it's a problem with blood sugar and insulin. When we are sleep deprived, again, our blood glucose rises, obviously from our hunger hormones are imbalanced. That's the first thing. But also when we're sleep deprived, we're more stressed. The body needs more cortisol and the adrenals are overworked. The adrenals are working overtime when we're sleep deprived, believe it or not. There's a lot of, high performing business owners, CEOs, and they're doing great in their business. I was speaking to somebody only last week and he said to me, Joanna, I don't like sleep. I don't like sleep because he can get more done in more hours when he doesn't sleep as much. If he doesn't have to sleep as much, he can get more done. But at the same time, he has complaints of he can't think straight. He keeps forgetting things. And so that's not a very good performance. It's not very effective, especially if you're a high performing CEO, a successful business person. And in the long term, that's going to get worse and worse. So when you sacrifice your sleep, it's going to raise your cortisol levels for sure. And cortisol is not an entire body. We need cortisol first thing in the morning, but like everything else, when there's too much cortisol and when it's at the wrong time, it's going to increase the blood glucose. So with insulin, what insulin does is it allows the glucose to enter into the cells. It's like a lock and key mechanism. And when you've got a lot of glucose in your body, the pancreas will release insulin to do this. But when you've got too much glucose knocking around, the pancreas, and I'm giving you the simplified version, the pancreas will keep pumping out insulin. And we can actually have too much insulin in our body as well. And all this will store as fat. The liver can store so much in the muscles, and then it's stored around the belly. And it's stored around the belly for convenience because it's easy access if the body needs it in case of an emergency or famine. The body is very clever where it stores all the fat. And then we can get insulin resistance then because the cells just get tired. So that's what happens ultimately. And it's the insulin resistance then. And then you end up needing medication and all that sort of stuff. But it's just a whole cascade, Danny. It's just a terrible cascade. Now, there has been studies that showed, it was a week-long study, and they showed people who slept for 5 or 6 hours. I think it was 6 hours that they slept for a whole week. So every night consecutively, they slept for 6 hours. They're allowed to sleep for 6 hours. And they've done it with two groups of people. So one was allowed to sleep as much as they wanted, or, their 8 hours. And the other one was only allowed 6 hours of sleep. And by the end of the week, the group who were only allowed to sleep for 6 hours, they were clinically borderline type 2 diabetes. And that borderline pre-diabetes, it's called pre-diabetes. So we can actually have this even in a week of bad night of sleep. We can be borderline. So we've got to be really, really careful because we don't want to go down that line of type 2 diabetes, because it has a whole cascade of problems with, all these problems, these horrible problems. And it's all long term and it's gradual. That's the problem. It's gradual. So an awful lot of time we don't realize, we don't see it happening because it's gradual. But 10 years can pass by very quickly, as I said as well. So I hope that explains. It's very simplified. simplified, but there's a lot we can go in depth in that. But it's a very, very big one to realize how sleep can help with obesity, weight loss, type 2 diabetes, all these things, and cardiovascular health.
Yeah. And it's something that I think if we were to start going down that rabbit hole, we'd be here for a couple hours. But something that I did really want to touch on, and I'm really happy that you brought it up because it was something that I was thinking of asking quite soon. And you did talk about CEOs, and I was like, perfect, awesome segue. So segueing off of that, there are people that they have this mentality that you just described. They can get more done if they don't get enough sleep. So therefore I should sleep less so I can get more done and achieve whatever goal that I want to achieve. And for an up and coming entrepreneur or an aspiring, if you're climbing the corporate ladder, so you want to be eventually that COO, CFO, CMO, or CEO, you're thinking that the more work you do is going to directly correlate to how much money you make and what your title can be and all these other amazing things that come with it. And you're fine with sacrificing sleep in the meantime. Do you find that there's a relation between that and burnout as well? Because you mentioned that already. They're noticing that they're going to be foggy, they're going to forget things, and that's going to affect productivity. Does it also affect the length in which they work? So like how long they're willing to be in a certain field or work with a certain company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, these top performing CEOs, entrepreneurs, they have a schedule, and they're busy. I don't like that word busy, but because busy is chaotic, it's overwhelming. I like to use the word productive instead. A lot of people use that word busy because words have energy, and that busy word, the energy that gives off is chaotic. So these people want to sacrifice sleep. And look, it's not that they're wrong. It's how they've grown up. It could stem from childhood or whatever. And this needing to perform this, I have to perform well. I have to look well. A lot of people, success means different things to different people. And there's a lot of people out there in the world that feel that they need to succeed in life. And that could be just all about making money. Success for other people is many other things, not just about making money. There is a financial success, but there's success in all different areas of our lives. But sometimes people can have this attachment to needing to look good or to be approved of, because so many of us in the world have this. I think most of us have this on some element of not feeling good enough. And that's a very big, and that goes back to childhood, and it goes back to how we've been taught by teachers, by our parents, by society, the expectations. So many of us are conforming to many things. The question is, what is success? What does success mean to you? And is it just financial success? Is it having the attention from loads of people? Or like, what is it that you're sacrificing sleep? I like to talk to people about values. John Demartini talks an awful lot about values because what you value are going to prioritize. It's going to be the top of your priority list. So if you understand the benefits of sleep and what sleep can provide in terms of these high performing coaches, CEOs, even athletes actually have sleep coaches, believe it or not, because sleep is very important for their performance. These beliefs that we have about sleep, like some people say things like, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or I don't have time to sleep. So really mind the language that you're using around sleep. How do you relate to sleep? What's your relationship with sleep? I talk about relationships in that way because we relate to everything, events, circumstances, people. It's not just relationships with people when we talk about relationships. How do you relate to sleep? What are you saying about sleep? Are you prioritizing it? Is it important to you? Do you value it? And I like to get people to do an exercise where they write down on the left-hand side of the piece of paper, just, everything that you get to have, like a payoff, everything that you get to have as a result of not sleeping very long, what's the payoff? And then on the right-hand side, write down the cost. What is it costing you not to sleep? And it's a really good reflective kind of an exercise to do to help people have a new perspective. And really, ultimately, when you do sleep, and you may only need 6 hours of sleep, providing it's efficient sleep, you need to have a good efficiency of sleep, which means having good quality sleep. If you have good quality of sleep, 6 hours might work for you, but the sleep will provide you with more cognitive function, the balance between the prefrontal cortex and your emotional brain, so you'll have more rational thinking, being able to make decisions quick, being able to plan quick in your responses. All these cognitive performances that a lot of CEOs do actually need, having meetings with people, being effective, being able to read other people, the communication. This is all part of this part of the brain, and we need to have that for. And relationships is very important in business because we can't have success on our own. We need to build really good, strong business relationships with other people. So we need to be authentic and be balanced with our amygdala, which is our emotional brain, and our prefrontal cortex. So I went off on a tangent there, Danny.
I think it's one that everyone will be very happy to have had, because we don't think about the effects of sleep in these kinds of meaningful ways. We think about it in terms of maybe the immune system, or maybe I just feel lethargic the next day. We don't consider our productivity, but we don't consider all the other things that accompany it. And especially as entrepreneurs and business owners and anyone that is trying to make a name for themselves, or honestly just a living, having something as simple as sleep can drastically change the trajectory of your life. And if you're not paying attention to it, just as you said, 10 years will go by very quickly. You'll find that you're not where you want to be. And if you just made those small little life changes, like getting enough sleep, for example, you maybe could have avoided some of the pitfalls that you found yourself having to waste time digging your way out of.
Yeah.
I can imagine that on your journey, you've experienced this as well. In your experience, what was your pro-con list, and how did you kind of have to reorient how you viewed sleep?
Well, before I started my own business, I started valuing sleep before I even started my business, because I have all my life experiences. When I was working the 9 to 5 job, I remember I'm in the office, it's a big open office, and I'm looking out the window and I'm exhausted. Another day that I'm just pure exhausted. And there I am. I can't wait. I'm looking at the watch and like, okay, 40 minutes to go. And the last 40 minutes of the day is like an eternity. I'm exhausted. I'm pretending to be on the phone. I'm pretending to talk to people. The things I did, like, you know, it was horrible. Like the feeling of you've been watched, and, you know, you could be fired if you're not performing well, and, you know, the fear around that. But I remember thinking there has to be a different way, because every day was the same. It was like Groundhog Day, because I was a single mother at the time. So I was dropping my son to school every morning, and, you know, the whole thing, getting up, getting ready for school, getting yourself ready for work, and going, dropping him to school, full day of work, and you're tired, exhausted. And then you've got to go and you have to leave work on time to pick your child up from the childminder, beat all the traffic, get home, make the dinner, and clean up after that. It was just the same thing. I was like, this is no quality of life. It's just shit. Like, you know, it was like, what am I even doing here? There's no quality in this kind of a life, you know? And I remember thinking when I was 27 years of age, there has to be a different way. Now, I didn't know what the answer was, but I knew, I identified this couldn't be it. And people thought I was mad when I, you know, shared how I felt. Like, but you have to work to earn money. And that's when people said that to me, I was like, no, couldn't be. And that was when a few years later, the whole entrepreneurial Megan happened. I lost Megan, and the whole entrepreneurial world happened for me. And I never looked back, because I'm my own boss, and, you know, I can do what I want to do. And now it has its own challenges as well. It's really important that we have a community of other entrepreneurs who do the same type of work that you do, and network. And and live events, going to live network. And it's really important, because being an entrepreneur can be very lonely, and we do need that social connections. That's one of our human needs. But I know when I like, there are some nights I don't sleep well, but that could be a circumstance, or it could be I get nervous sometimes, not all the time, but I get nervous if I have a big speaking event coming up and I mightn't sleep well the night before. Now, it's not half as bad as what it used to be. I remember one time I was so nervous showing up for my live event that I actually did not show up for my live event, right? That's a very funny story. But I did in the end. But I was 2 hours late going to my event because I was too terrified to go. I had to speak on stage, and I was absolutely terrified. So I have tools and techniques now to calm myself down at nighttime. I do conscious breathing. I do it in the morning. I find it more effective in the morning, doing conscious breathing. It really helps to set me up for the day. I create my intentions for the day first thing in the morning before I even get out of the bed. I do gratitude in the evening times and in the morning, because that raises your vibration. So all these can help to put you in a place of safety. And I think ultimately that's the problem for most people, is you need to feel safe to sleep. And that might seem a bit bizarre. You really have to think about that one, because why are people not sleeping? Well, ultimately they're worried, they're concerned, they're anxiety, they're depressed, they're worried about paying the bills, 101 racing thoughts, things that they have to do. So that's safety. All that's got to do with safety. So we don't feel safe to be able to just go off into a very deep sleep for the amount of time our body needs. And a lot of people are waking up really, really early, because the body is like, okay, you've had enough of sleep now, get up and get your work done, because it's all in our head, like last thing at night before we went to bed, everything that we have to do. And there's just a whole anxiety. So you need to adapt tools, and whatever those tools are for you, to help you wind down at nighttime, to help you relax your brain. Gratitude, journaling, dumping it out from your brain out onto a piece of paper. And there's loads of exercises that we can do to help us to wind down at nighttime. But ultimately, starting your day off well is just as important. And for me, I don't even turn my phone on for a few hours first thing in the morning, because those first few hours in the morning are my golden time, and that's what's setting me up for the day. And I do what I want like, I won't open my calendar until 11 o'clock in the morning for most of my calls. So that's really, really important, that we set our day up well and we have an intention. And actually, there's a very good quote by Einstein that says, do you believe the world is a friendly place or a hostile place? And depends on how you answer that is your view of life. So if you're an optimistic or pessimistic, so if you start your day thinking the world is a friendly place And say if somebody cuts you off in traffic, for example, which happens quite a lot, you could go nuts and get angry. Or you could say to yourself, oh, that person must have had a bad start to the day, or not make a big deal out of it and just carry on with your day. Whereas if you make a thing out of that, it's going to get your cortisol levels up. It's going to get you angry and frustrated. And your brain is going to do what it does. It wires all that in. And now your brain is going to be looking for more of that to be safe. It's really funny how the whole brain works and the neuroscience behind it. Look, I could talk for this for hours, but it's fascinating. But we really need to identify and know what it is that will help to calm down those brain waves and calm down those thoughts and help us feel safe.
I think it would be a disservice to anyone to not end with, how do they feel safe? How can they make themselves feel safe? If you're in an environment where maybe you don't have a great support system, or you are part of a really high performing household and there's a lot of pressure on you to perform well, have good grades, get into the good school, all these things. Or if you yourself are a business person, or you're just starting off in business and you're realizing, oh, entrepreneurship is a lot. This is a lot different than what I thought it was going to be. And there's a lot more stress that you have to deal with every day. How can people find safety when they look around themselves and they can't find it? Because I know I can speak for just the friends that I have. I have one who's living in South Africa, which is stress in and of itself, but he has a family, and he's like, yeah, I need to make sure that I'm providing for my sisters and like my future and everything. And he's taking on all this responsibility because he feels like it's all resting all on his shoulders. And every single time I talk to him, literally every single time I talk to him, it is either in the middle of the night, or he hasn't gone to sleep, or maybe he's gotten 2 hours and he makes a joke out of it, like, oh yeah, third night in a row that I've only gotten 2 hours or 3 hours. And we laugh at it like, haha, that's so funny, but it's not. It's like, you need your sleep. What can someone like that do to find their own form of sanctuary?
You know what, Danny, that is a great question. It really is. And it's different for everyone. But look, here's the thing. We're living in a world that's just gotten so busy, and it's getting busier, and there's so much tech, and it's really overwhelming. Even the amount of information out there, because we're all, anybody who does intentionally want to get better at something, they're looking on the internet, that can get way overwhelming. And that's a stress in and of itself. So we can be looking, and then there's expectations from people around us, our environment as well. So here's the thing, right? And it's actually really simple, but we're just so primed and wired, right? It's just a matter of unlearning and then relearning, if you like. So we operate from our external world. We operate in what other people expect us to do because we want to look good, we want to be approved of, we want to be liked. Just have a look at how we operate with Facebook and LinkedIn and all these things. We get a dopamine hit every time we get likes on our posts and all this, right? But we have all our own answers, and we need to have a look at our values. I really encourage people to do it as a John D. Martini exercise. Just look it up. It goes through all the different areas of your life and what you value in all those different areas of your life. It's a bit of an exercise, but it's an eye-opener. Have a look at what you value, because most of the time what we value is other people's expectations of us, because we want to look good, we want to be approved of, all this sort of thing. Now, when we have a look at our own values and what it is that we enjoy doing, you mightn't even realize that we mightn't even be connected with that because we're so busy concerned about the exterior world. So do that exercise, have a look at what it is that you value, and go and have fun. Find out what it is that brings you, that laughter, that lightheartedness, and that could be nothing to do with work. I know they say that if you love doing what you do and work, you're not working a day of your life, but make sure you're having a bit of fun. Hang out with your kids. Like so many of us who are entrepreneurs and have children where, we have that mummy guilt or whatever, we're trying to do work. Hang out with your kids. You will learn so much from your children, but have a bit of fun. Go out in the field and play football or tennis or whatever, because the fun will reduce the stress. And when you have fun, you will be more open-minded. You will see the wider view of life, and you will get surprising hits of downloads when you're having fun, when you're least expecting it, because your brain is more open. It's just profound. You have to experience it though to feel this. It's an experience. So that I'll end it on that, Danny, but that's what I would say.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for your insights and for your time today.
Lovely, Danny. I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah, we could talk for another 2 hours here, I suppose. But hopefully now somebody will get something out of that. And I just, encourage somebody to take one nugget, even because it can get overwhelming, with all the information. Just take one nugget that resonate with your listeners and apply it tonight. And I do wish everybody very well with their life and with their sleep.
And I thank you. And it is true. All you need is one nugget. And we've certainly gone through quite a few today. I'm very thankful for the time that you dedicated today. And I think that's a nice way to wrap up for now, at least.
Yeah, well, you have a great day, Danny, and I will be speaking to you soon.
And that wraps up today's episode of Vibrant Living Diaries. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing your expertise, and to the International Wellness Alliance for making this all possible. And that wraps up today's episode of Vibrant Living Diaries. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing your expertise, and to the International Wellness Alliance for making this all possible. Remember, the insights and stories we've shared today are steps towards embracing a life of holistic fulfillment, and we hope that you've been inspired to take the next step forward in your own wellness journey. As always, we're eager to hear your thoughts and experiences. Connect with us on our social media platforms and share how you're integrating the knowledge gained here into your daily life. I'm Danielle Grobman and can't wait to continue this journey with you in our next episode. Until then, keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the vibrant life you deserve. Speak soon.